So we are now in the season of Lent, which, among other things, is a time of preparation for Easter, Holy Week, all those events, the culmination of Jesus' life. And so we're going to be walking with Jesus. We've been doing that through this sermon series, Who is Jesus? So we'll continue that. Interestingly, our reading today is actually from Paul, but you'll see it points us back to Jesus. So the reading is from Romans 7, verses 17 through 20. Listen now for God's word through the Apostle Paul, and I'm reading from the Message version, which is particularly powerful in this chapter. Paul says, after referring to the law, I need something more. For if I know the law but still can't keep it, and if the power of sin within me keeps sabotaging my best intentions, I obviously need help. I realize that I don't have what it takes. I can will it, but I can't do it. I decide to do good, but I don't really do it. I decide not to do bad, but then I do it anyway. My decisions, such as they are, don't result in actions. Something has gone wrong deep within me and gets the better of me every time. It happens so regularly that it's predictable. The moment I decide to do good, sin is there to trip me up. I truly delight in God's commands, but it's pretty obvious that not all of me joins in that delight. Parts of me covertly rebel, and just when I least expect it, they take charge. I've tried everything, and nothing helps. I'm at the end of my rope. Is there no one who can do anything for me? Isn't that the real question? The answer, thank God, is that Jesus Christ can and does. He acted to set things right in this life of contradictions, where I want to serve God with all my heart and mind, but I'm pulled by the influence of sin to do something totally different. Here ends the reading. Well, I realized that recently, I've been diving right in, and I haven't, had many jokes at the beginning, so I've actually got two little jokes this morning. You're going to have to decide how they connect with anything else that I've got to say, but the first is just a cartoon, actually, of a praying mantis that was in a psychiatrist's office on the couch, and the praying mantis says to the psychiatrist, I try to keep the communication lines open, but something inside me would just rather eat him. I can't tell if you get that or if that's funny or not to you, but going against his nature, The other one is about two priests who were in a very cold climate, and it was time for them to get out of the cold and to take a vacation. So the two priests went down to some Caribbean island, and they were on the beach, and they decided, normally we wear priestly garb, the collar and the habit and everything, but let's just take it off for the vacation. I mean, they had no illicit intentions or anything. Let's just not be obviously known as a priest. So they actually went to the little boutique at this place they were staying and bought some crazy looking Bermuda shorts and swimsuits, and just figured they'd really do it up and not look like priests. They went out on the beach the first day. And everything was going fine. They were just kind of incognito, lying in the sun. And all of a sudden, two very nice-looking women in bikinis walked by. And one of them smiled at the priest. And so the priest said, well, hello. And she said, hello, fathers. And they're like, how did she know? So they went back to the boutique, and they got some even crazier-looking stuff. And they figured, we're not going to look like priests. So the next day they went out there, and the same women came by, and the one woman smiled again and waved and said, hello, fathers. And the one of them said, all right, how in the world do you know we're priests? I mean, we're proud of it. We're not trying to hide anything, but how did you know we're priests? And the woman said, Father, it's me, Sister Angela. All right. Somebody's got to at least be laughing. I can't see you or hear you, but you better be laughing. All right. this reading from Paul is quite a reading, isn't it? And in case it's not obvious, this isn't just a description of an issue that Paul is struggling with, that Paul was some particularly conflicted person. It's there because in one way or another, this is all of us. The experience of wanting to be a certain way, wanting to be consistent in our faith, to be kind, to be loving to the extent to which we know we're called, wanting to do that and somehow constantly falling short. And all I can say is that the people over the years that I have trusted who are most committed to being true to Christ, following Jesus closely, trying to live it, trying to walk the talk, are usually the ones who are most honest about the extent to which they fail. And any real commitment to being a consistent disciple in terms of how you live your life and who you are when no one's looking, any real attempt to that will only reveal this inner struggle that most of us have to try to be consistent with that. But so thankfully, Paul's just being really honest and vulnerable and saying that if there's something in your life, my life, that I'm struggling with, and I wish we knew more about what Paul specifically was referring to. But if there's something that we just can't get free around, some part of life where we know things would be better, we would be happier, we would be more joyful, we would be more free, people around us would have a better time if we could just move through this. And it could be any number of different things, and I'm hesitant to get specific because I don't want to take any of you to a place of shame. You know what your own issues might be, places where you're not free. The point of the text is the very end. After all of that amazing description of the inner dynamics of being caught and not able by the sheer power of your own will to stop doing something that you should not be doing or to start doing something you should, he says, is there any way to freedom here? And then he answers his own question. He says, yes, thank God Jesus is the way to freedom. So who is Jesus for today? Jesus is the way or a way to freedom. I like that Paul sometimes refers to being a Christian as being on the way. In fact, the way was one of the first ways in which people referred to the followers of Jesus, to the early Christian community. They said it was the way, and Jesus once referred to himself as the way. I like that because it underscores the fact that Christianity is not just a matter of believing the right stuff. It's not just a set of propositions that we believe about Jesus. It's a path. It's a commitment to a certain way of being, of living. And I think that's a very simple truth that a lot of people don't understand. And in fact, think we need to actually leave Christianity. They think, well, Christianity is a matter of believing in this or that statement of faith. What I need is a path. And so they leave Christianity altogether and go to another religion where there is a path that's clearly spelled out, like Buddhism, for example. And I love Buddhism. There's nothing wrong with that. But I want people to know that Christianity is also a path. If your church experience is just an intellectual exercise, it may be interesting, but it's not going to be transformative. It won't lead you into freedom and joy. As beautiful and important as our minds are, they themselves can't get us into the heart of divine truth. God is not ultimately a riddle to be solved, or a mystery to be figured out, or a question to be answered, or an ethical or moral system to be analyzed. And if all Bible study, by the way, is an intellectual exploration, it may be fascinating sometimes, but it won't ultimately be liberating, and over time it usually becomes less compelling. The way of Jesus, though, is actually quite simple, but it's demanding. As I've often said, you've heard me say this before, it's a quote that I like a lot. It says, "The spiritual journey is the free gift that costs everything." Both of those statements are true. It's all about grace. It's all a gift. It's a gift to even care about this stuff. And yet it is a call, an invitation to show up with our entire being and be on this road called the way of Jesus. Now, I don't want to be overly simplistic, but I think we make this stuff too complicated sometimes. And that's why I shared with the kids that the way of Jesus involves 4 basic things. And they aren't linear, and I'm not listing them in any particular order of importance. But if we want to experience the kind of freedom that Paul talks about at the end of the reading, then here's the solution. So there's 4 points. I want to make sure we get these 4. The first one, there's an ongoing relationship with, or an experience of, or encounter with the unconditional love and grace of God. Somehow, as the 12-step programs often put it, we come to believe and experience that there is a power greater than us. I mean, we call it God. We call it Jesus Christ. There is a divine, and step 1 is having an experience with that. There's no one way for this to happen. For some people, it is a gradual thing. You grow up in the whole thing, and you just keep learning, getting closer, and then you have moments, perhaps, where you may be off on a walk someplace, and you see a sunset, and all of a sudden something becomes real in a way that it didn't before. There's just no one way. But the point is that at some point, an encounter with the presence of God. And at some point, I would love for us to have a sermon series where you all do the preaching and share with each other, maybe once a month, some year. Share with each other some of your experiences of the presence of God. Because it's encouraging. It helps us to see how that happens for different people in different ways. But that's step 1. And you may be sitting here saying, okay, well, that's never happened for me. You know, I have not had an experience with God that I could name or somehow respond to, and that's okay. There are some people that say, look, I really don't believe in a personal God anyway. Thank God we're a church where this is all wide open. You get to wrestle with how this is going to be real to you. For some of you, it might just be a relationship with your own deepest sense of what is true and ultimate and most important and valuable and most loving to you. Get in touch with that. That's a good place to start. But that's step 1. An experience. And it doesn't just happen. I'm not talking about a one-time thing. I'm talking about a relationship with this. Step 2 is that we commit ourselves to getting to know God, learning to hear God's voice, receive God's guidance, and to responding as best we can with God's help. And this will often mean being willing to change some things. Let go of some things or embrace some things in response to what we're hearing when we listen to and for God. And for us as followers of Jesus, this means we commit ourselves to studying and responding to his teachings, and to his example. So, Bible study would be a part of that. But this is just how you're going to learn, how you're going to grow, how you're going to get deeper, closer with this presence. The third thing is we find a group of people who are also committed to being free to experience and listen for and respond to the will of God. In other words, a church for us. We find a group of people who are serious about listening for the leading and guidance of love. And then we get to know these people well enough over time that we can actually risk being vulnerable and open to our real struggles, to sharing them. And who we know will never judge us or shame us, and who we know will encourage us. Not to agree with them on everything, but to encourage us to keep growing individually and as a community. And let's face it, this is where a lot of churches fail, right? Too many churches, in my experience, and I know in the experience of many others, are not safe enough places for people to get vulnerable and honest and real. So we come to church on a Sunday morning, back when we could come to church, an actual building. We put on a nice face, and we go along with the program, but we don't really get to know each other. And that Sunday morning is not the time for that. That usually happens in smaller groups within a church fellowship. But that's step 3, is you don't do this by yourself. The way of Jesus is a call into community. And then the last part, we keep on asking God to show us how to invite others into this experience of unconditional love for everyone, and how we can use our gifts, our abilities, our talents given to us individually and as a group to do something beautiful in this world that God wants to do through us. Okay, so now let me summarize so you get it really easily. All 4. 1, we have an experience with the unconditional love of God. 2, we commit ourselves to seeking and following and learning and responding to God and become willing to make some changes if necessary. 3, we find a group of people to do this with who will encourage us to be real and honest. We risk getting to know them. And 4, we ask God to show us what's ours to do in service to the world, and we do it. One more time, even shorter. 1, we experience God. 2, we respond to God. 3, we find the right group to do it with. 4, we serve each other in the world. And that's it. That's the way of Jesus. And I took this much time to articulate that because this, according to Paul, is the way to freedom from the impasses in our life and in our world. Now, I know the majority of us probably don't believe that. I'm just being honest. You've heard me mention Tony Campolo, a sociologist, evangelist, preacher. I heard Tony one time say, after all these years, I'm convinced that every problem you have is because you won't do what Jesus tells you to do with regard to it. And at first I thought, Tony, that's overly simplistic. If you hear nothing else today, take that one line and think about it. Paul is telling us that if you're caught in your life and the sheer force of your will cannot set you free, whatever it is, then here's the way to freedom. Get close to God. Talk to God about it. Seek God's will regarding it. Be open to hearing whatever God truly says in a way that's real to you. Share that with some other people. You can't do it by yourself. Don't try. You need a regular experience in community with people with whom you can be real, who won't shame you, who can handle the truth about your life and help you. And 4, serve somebody. Don't make life all about you and your issues. Make sure you're getting outside of yourself and looking beyond and giving. And that in and of itself will do something to you that you need. That's it. All right, now, here's the real thing. And this gets back to the rest of Paul's scripture, and I don't have time to get to it today, but why don't we do this? Right? So Paul said, yeah, this. I know what to do. But man, I often don't. It has something to do with sin, which is a word I don't use too much because it's got so much baggage and people have been beat over the head with it. We need to redefine that and re-embrace it, and that'll be another message. But you've probably heard Einstein's quip about insanity. Insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. It's also been said that insanity is knowing what the right thing to do or what will work and not doing it. I promise you, I challenge you, if you do the 4 things that I just outlined, and if you forgot them, you can watch the sermon again on Facebook or whatever. If you do those 4 things, I guarantee if you're at an impasse, something will happen. Well, I can't guarantee that, but I'll bet you. All right, so I got to begin to end here. But I want to take a quick look at the fact that this applies socio-politically as well as personally. I think we overcomplicate a lot of the issues in the world. I think deep down, a lot of us know exactly what needs to be done. And if we can convince ourselves that an issue is too big or too complicated, then we don't have to do anything. We can throw up our hands and say, well, what can we do? It's so entrenched, it's so big, we can't do anything. And that, according to the Bible, is a lie. There's plenty that we can do if we will do what we know we are called to do. The way of Jesus is to do what's ours to do, which may not be to fix an issue, but we can respond to issues faithfully. As Mother Teresa put it, do what you can where you are with what you've got. Do little things with great love. Little things done with great love in the hands of God sometimes have incredible power. We don't know where it goes. We've been taking on some big issues in our little church. Racism, climate change, eco-justice, immigration. I think it's really important, if we're not going to talk each other blue and burn each other out, for our conversations to eventually lead to something that's specific and tangible that we can get on the adventure of faithfully pulling off with God's help. So, for example, we focused on Nyan today. What if we as a church decided, okay, we're going to find one family and work together with the organization El Ultra Lodo, who is doing the work, bringing the court cases, doing all the legwork, but work with them to make sure that one family we know of and are in relationship with gets reunited. And just say, we are going to stick with that until it's done. And if and when we see that come to fruition, and I have no doubt we will. The families are there. They've located them. They know where the kids are. They know where the parents are. There's just a bunch of red tape and resources needed for them to get back together. We could help them do that. Or we, together with the Wisconsin Conference, could do that. And I guarantee that all the issues would come up in the process, and we would learn and grow and be driven to our knees in prayer, and we would watch God do some miracles. I have no doubt. So, yeah, I got to close. A few years ago when I was feeling called by God to get off the road, for 31 years, I had been traveling around. And it was a beautiful ministry, and I was called to it. And there are things that you can say and do passing through a community that you can't when you're there every week. But I missed being able to build something and grow something with one group of people over time. I was often invited to consult with churches. I don't know how exactly it happened, but somehow over the years I got the reputation of having some expertise as how churches work, and they'd ask me, what do we need to do about this or that, especially mission. Maybe it was my work in Haiti, I don't know, but we'd often talk. And almost always I would leave saying, thank you, God, that I am not the pastor of that church. Because they're not going to do what it will take. And I spent a good part of my life sort of critiquing churches and telling them what they should do, what they could do if they were really serious about being church, et cetera, et cetera. And the problem was I didn't really have a church myself. I got tired of that. And I was haunted by another dictum of my mentor, Gordon Cosby, who said, for something to be real, it has to be local. And then you all came along. Make a long story short, you were looking just when I started to look. And I felt like God called my bluff and said, instead of talking about what a church could do or be, how about you be it? And do it together with a group of people. And I can't tell you how grateful I am. You all are the first time that step 3 of this has really felt like it's coming to life for me. 3 is finding a group of people to do this with. And we're going to trip and stumble in all the ways that any group of people do. But I am so grateful. I know that there's some deep faith in this circle and a lot of gifts. And I'm excited to see what God can and will do in and through us if we just say, okay, we commit ourselves to the way of Jesus. And so finally, those 4 things, which one are you struggling with? Maybe you've never really had an experience of God. Okay. Ask for it and mean it. Maybe you don't know much. You've never really studied your faith. You've got opportunities. Maybe you're in and out of the church thing. You haven't made a commitment. You're welcome to. And maybe you haven't figured out how to use your gifts in service to someone else yet. Well, let's figure that out together. We'll help each other. All right, that's enough. We're going to close with one of my songs that we've sung before, but it just seemed to fit the essence of the message, and that is Dream God's Dream.